This year, actually, we partnered with TalkShoppe to do a quantitative and qualitative study around trending millennials and Gen Z behaviors. But what we found was there was an interesting generational subsegment called the Cuspers that are currently 19 to 25. So they actually have traits from both millennials and Gen Z, and they have traits that are unique to this audience as well. So what's really interesting, there's always going to be Cuspers of two generations as, we move from one to the next. But what's interesting about this audience is they're at this life stage where they are forming relationships with brands, they are coming into their own, they're making their own big purchase decisions for the first time. And so they're fiscally irresponsible, but they're also fiercely loyal. So if brands can form connections with them today, they have a really high lifetime value potential. So that's why we're really excited about it, because they actually represent $622 billion in potential US spending power. And they are at a point in their lives where they're wanting to form relationships with brands and actually make those connections.
So tell us about FullScreen and sort of the approach that you guys use to monetize your content, how that looks and how that works.
So FullScreen is a youth-oriented content and experience-driven company. We help brands become more like creators. We actually manage about 8,000 creators, and we're helping them shape brands, become their own brand, create content for this generation, create their own social profiles that are actually more authentic than having, potentially just an intern create it. And on the flip side, we're actually helping brands become more like creators. So we're taking cues from what we've learned on how creators are speaking authentically and applying that to brands to help them communicate better with youth-oriented audiences. So in terms of content monetization, there's a bunch of different ways that we do it. We have our network of talent where we're selling ad inventory and helping them monetize more. And then we are also, doing that for brands on the other side, whether we are helping them develop content that will help them better monetize on the platform. So at the heart of what we do, we're helping build brands on these digital platforms, but we do a little content monetization as well.
So the whole notion of MCN, I don't know if you use that term, but you guys have sort of succeeded where so many have failed. I don't know if that's a fair statement, but...
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, MCN, it was funny, as soon as people figured out what that meant, it became a bad word. So, we were using that term for so long, and now you had to move beyond the MCN style model to succeed. We started out by taking creators and having a percentage of what they made to help build them, but you quickly learn that you have to go beyond that and you have to build value elsewhere to really succeed, because these creators are becoming more sophisticated. Every year I see them become more professional, be able to build their own brands, and so we've had to build other models to survive and really thrive in this new marketplace.
And the notion of influencer, how does that work? In other words, brands looking to align themselves with influencers, there's big value in it, but there's also, it can be a little bit tricky.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
There is nothing easy about influencer marketing. I mean, because we're dealing with, people that have developed their own brands, and we're trying to authentically integrate in that, and you have these huge companies that have built their own brand and trying to marry the two. So I feel it's about finding the right balance, and that's why there's companies like FullScreen. Is we pride ourselves in understanding those nuances and helping brands navigate and helping creators navigate and finding those perfect partnerships and figuring out a way to build that authenticity between the two brands, essentially.
And finally, just tell us a little about the distribution, the platforms, and the strategy around that of the content.
What really depends on, if we're working with a creator, it's usually where they've decided to create their hero content and connect with their audience. But if we're dealing with a brand, we analyze audience first. Where's your audience most likely to connect? Because brands these days are being asked to develop content platform first, authentically. You can no longer just dump all of your assets onto social media. So you have to find those key platforms that you're willing to invest in. So we look at audience first, how does that audience engaging in those platforms, and then how can we really help brands pick and choose those platforms to invest in and distribute accordingly. So if you're younger audience, that might be TikTok or Snapchat, but if you're trying to reach an older audience, that may be YouTube and Instagram, and figuring out the best ways for brands to live authentically on these platforms.